So, hi! Welcome to this subject, the contemporary world. Kaka-cringe. Tagal na natin di gumawa ng mga ganitong video. And for today's video, we're going to talk about one of the most important topics in the contemporary world, and that is the global divide. So let's dive in. And before we go into that, let me remind everyone that there are videos out there na makakatulong sa atin para mas maintindihan natin ang patungkol sa global divides. At susubukan natin na pasimplahin ito at upang sa ganay mas mabilis natin itong maintindihan. And here are the learning outcomes of this lesson. We're going to examine the term global north and global south, identify examples of countries which are categorized as global north and global south, distinguish the characteristics of the global north and global south, and react to the world order as divided into south and north. So let's have an overview about this topic, the global divides, the north and south. The world has been divided in different ways. Because of historical factors, countries have been categorized as first world, second world, or third world. In recent times, nation-states are identified either as the global north or global south. Most often, they are defined based on their wealth and development. Let us start by looking at the definition given by Immanuel Wallerstein on what globalization is all about. He believes that globalization is the reflection of a triumph of the capitalist world economy bonded by a global division of labor. Let's take a look at the world model that was proposed by Immanuel Wallerstein. So Immanuel Wallerstein divided the world economy into three. We have the core, semi-periphery, and periphery. In core countries like United States, Japan, Germany, there is a high level of industrialization and urbanization. They also have high wages, high technology production patterns, and lahat na. Ito yung mga pinaka-sentro sa lahat. Pinaka-malalakas na mga bansa. Pinaka-matataas na bansa in terms of wages, technological innovation. So sila yung mga nangunguna. And we also have the semi-periphery or the semi-peripheral countries. We have South Korea, Taiwan, Mexico, Brazil, India, South Africa. These are less developed than core nations but more developed than peripheral countries. And of course, in the last one, we have the periphery, or these countries are dependent on core countries. They are less industrialized and of course less urbanized compared to the semi-periphery and core countries. Let's take a look at the model. In core, they have high profit consumption goods. In the periphery, they are the producers of cheap labor and raw materials. And as we all know, those core countries are continuously exploiting what's in the peripheral countries. Real talk. And of course, in the core countries, they produce high profit consumption of goods that was delivered or created by the peripheral countries. Semi-periphery, which is the buffer zone between these two categories, the core and the periphery. So that's all about the Wallerstein world system model. Let's take a look at the history of the global divides. The North and South divide is a socio-economic and political division of Earth popularized in the late 20th century and early 21st century. Prior to the division of the world as global North and global South, it was divided into three world countries. According to Gorman, the first world are countries which are aligned with the United States, adhering to capitalism as their economic and political system. The second world are countries aligned with the new defunct Soviet Union, adhering to the principles of communism. The third world of non-aligned, and they are generally poor nations. People use the term third world to refer to poor nations in general. Now, let's take a look at the concept of the third world. The term third world originated in 1952 article by Alfred Sauvy. Sino nga ba si Alfred Sauvy? He was a demographer, an anthropologist, historian of the French economy, and he coined the term third world. Early definitions of the third world emphasize its exclusion from the East-West conflict of the Cold War, as well as the ex-colonial status and poverty of the nations it comprised. Efforts to mobilize the third world as an autonomous political entity were undertaken. Following this, the first non-aligned summit was organized in 1961. With the end of the Cold War, the term Second World was not used anymore. Saan nga ba nagmula ang North and South divide? So it came or it began during the Cold War with the classification of East and West. So ano nga ba yung nangyari o kaganapan during the Cold War? Cold War is the term used to describe the rivalry between the United States and the Soviet Union in their respective allies after World War II. The Cold War centered on major political and economic propaganda and not necessarily on recourse to weapons. It was George Orwell, an English writer, who first used this term in 1945 to refer to what he predicted would be a nuclear stalemate between 2 or 3 monstrous superstates, each possessed of a weapon by which millions of people can be wiped out in a few seconds. Nuclear weapons. Here we have the summary of Cold War. Soviet and Eastern Bloc nations versus the US and the Western democracy. The goal of the Soviet and Eastern Bloc nations is to spread worldwide communism, and on the other hand, it is the containment of communism. Paano nangyari itong Cold War? We have the espionage of the Committee for State Security and the Central Intelligence Agency of the federal government of the United States. Nagkaroon ng spiya sa isa't isa. Arms race or the nuclear weapons. The competition for the minds and hearts of the third world people. Communist government and command economy versus democratic government and capitalist economy. The NATO or the North Atlantic Treaty Organization versus the Warsaw Pact. So that's the summary of the Cold War. Generally, definition of the GN include the G8 countries, namely Germany, Canada, France, Italy, United Kingdom, Russia, Japan, and United States of America is located. All member states of the EU or the European Union, Israel, Japan, Singapore, South Korea, as well as Australia and New Zealand, including the 4 of the 5 permanent members of the United Nations Security Council, excluding China. So, sino-sino nga ba ulit yung mga P5 na nandun sa video na ginawa ko? We have China, France, Russia, United Kingdom, and United States. So, 4 of the P5 or the permanent 5 are included in the GN or the Global North. Among the characteristics of countries belonging to the Global North are established democracy, wealth, technological advancement, political stability, aging population, zero population growth, dominance of world trade, and politics. On the contrary, the Global South are societies with agrarian economies like Africa, India, China, Latin America, and others which do not have stable economy and politics compared to the Global North, Philippines included. These countries experience turmoil, war, conflict, poverty, anarchy, and tyranny. Third world countries are now termed as the Global South. Para hindi siya magtunog derogatory at since mahilig tayo mag-sugarcoat, din na natin sila tinatawag na third world, kundi tatawagin natin silang Global South or di kaya'y developing countries. Gets? This is what we call the Brandt line, which was proposed by who? Willy Brandt, kaya nga siya Brandt line. Brandt line is a visual depiction of the North-South divide in the 1980s. It is an imaginary line dividing the world into 2 regions based on their GDP per capita. The map shows that generally, rich countries are found in the northern hemisphere and poor countries are in the southern hemisphere, with the exception of Australia and New Zealand. It encircles the world at a latitude of approximately 30 degrees north, passing between North and Central America, north of Africa, and the Middle East, climbing north over China and Mongolia but dipping south so as to include Australia and New Zealand in the rich north. Nevertheless, this global partition has become blurry and less useful since the economies of many countries have changed over time because of the fast flows of goods, services, ideas, culture, or in other words, because of globalization. Nagko-contract na itong division between the global north and the global south. And that's it for the global divides. If there are concerns or questions with regards to the topic, please comment it down below. And if you have some additional information, paki-comment na lang din sa baba. I would really appreciate that. Let's help one another to understand the concepts na nakapaloob sa ating contemporary world. With that, for my concluding statement here in this video, I'd like to thank everyone always there to support my crafts, my works. I know sometimes things may not always make sense to you right now. Yeah, Eminem. Pero yun nga, maraming salamat sa patuloy niyong pagsuporta at patawarin ninyo ako kung ako ay masyadong late mag-upload ng mga ganitong educational videos. What if yun na lang yung gamitin ko, diba? Yung parang voice prompt ba yun?
Tama ka, Sir Clifford.
At sabi nga nila, mahalin mo ang sarili mo kasi walang taong makakapagbigay sa iyo ng totoong pagmamahal kundi ang sarili mo. Yun lamang po at maraming salamat. Bye-bye.